Are you growing these for the nice green onion tops that they're going to provide, or are you growing these for the actual bulb here? What's up, Lazy Dog fam? Hope all y'all are having an awesome day. It is Thursday, November 13th here in South Georgia, and our shallots here behind me are really starting to grow and multiply a little bit. So in today's video, I thought we'd dig a little deeper into the shallot growth process, talk about what causes these things to multiply as they grow, and also talk about what conditions are going to favor more multiplication, smaller bulbs, and then what conditions are going to favor less multiplication and probably larger bulbs in the end. So here's our shallots. You can see they're starting to look pretty good. These are the Louisiana Evergreen Shallots. We can't grow just any shallot variety down here in the deep south, but we can grow these. We'll talk about that more towards the end of the video. But you can see getting a lot of good vegetative growth on these and starting to get a little multiplication there. And so those were all started by planting little bulbs like these right here, although the ones we planted were much smaller than these. So let's talk a little basic shallot biology that will help make the rest of this video make more sense. So shallots and some other perennial multiplying alliums belong to the species Allium cepa variety aggregatum. And so aggregatum is a Latin word that means clustered, so that's a perfect name for them because these don't grow as just one large bulb like a bulbing onion. They grow in clusters. But how do they grow in clusters, or what makes these multiply? Why do these spread out and multiply and a bulbing onion doesn't? So if we cut open one of these shallot bulbs here, it gives us a better idea of how this happens. So take a look at this picture here I took earlier today. I cut open one of these Louisiana Evergreen Shallot bulbs, and if you look inside there, look for the green, you can see that there's not just one green vegetative shoot, but there are multiple vegetative shoots. If you look real close, you might see 2 or even 3 of them. So there are multiple vegetative shoots inside each bulb here, and then once this bulb is planted and starts growing, you get further division from an area they call the basal plate, which is right above this root zone here. So you get division of that basal plate, and that's what causes these daughter bulbs or these additional bulbs, eventually giving you a big cluster there. So that's how you get from one shallot bulb to a cluster of maybe 30 or 40. So unlike a bulbing onion that's going to pour all its energy into this one large bulb, these are going to pour a lot of their energy into continually multiplying or dividing into this large cluster. So now that we understand how it happens kind of at a basic level, let's talk about what conditions are more favorable for more multiplication or more vegetation, and what conditions are more favorable for larger bulbs in the end. And I think that's important depending on what you're growing these for. Are you growing these for the nice green onion tops that they're going to provide? That's what you want. You want to use all those green onion tops. Or are you growing these for the actual bulb here? Now, these bulbs are not as mild as some of your shallots you may get at a grocery store. These tend to be a little bit more pungent. They're good, but some people are growing them for the top. Some people are growing them more for the bulbs. And as we've demonstrated in the past, you don't need huge bulbs for your seed stock. We planted really tiny bulbs in the past and this year with that planting right there, and still get a really good grow out. So it's not like we need to grow out big bulbs to keep these things going and going. So let's talk about scenario one. Let's say you're just growing these to eat the green onion tops. You just want these things to grow as much vegetation as possible, to multiply as much as possible, because that's going to give you even more vegetation. You're really not worried about the size of the shallot bulbs. You just want a lot of green tops to harvest. So if your goal is to grow more green tops, you're going to want these things to multiply as much as possible. And as we've demonstrated in the past, pretty easy to plant a single bulb and have it multiply into 30 or 40, maybe even more throughout the growth cycle until the plants die back in the summer. And so if that's your goal, the recipe is pretty simple. Don't worry about plant spacing that much. You can plant them fairly close together and feed them a lot of nitrogen. That's what's going to make them produce a ton of vegetation and get them to continuously multiply for you. Now in doing that, producing a cluster of 30 or 40 bulbs, those bulbs may not get that big. They probably won't be as big as this one right here when the plants die back and you harvest them the following summer. But if your goal was maximum vegetation, you're not really worried about bulb size because even those smaller bulbs can be replanted. So closer spacing and a high nitrogen diet are going to provide more multiplication, and I also think climate has something to do with this as well. Based on some stuff I've been reading lately, seems like a warmer climate is going to cause them to multiply more. So if you live in an area with, not a very cold winter, you're going to get more multiplication, more vegetative growth than an area that has a colder winter. And that makes good sense because I've never really been able to grow big shallot bulbs down here, but some of these that we've been getting from a grower in Illinois lately are pretty good size. So that follows suit. It would make sense that someone in a cooler climate, they're not producing as much vegetation as we are down here in the winter months. They can end up growing larger bulbs than we can. Okay, so we talked about the recipe for more vegetation, more multiplication, but smaller bulbs. Now let's talk about what we can do to get those larger bulbs. So if larger bulbs, less vegetation, less multiplication, but larger bulbs are your goal, you're going to feed them more of a balanced nutrition. Back off the nitrogen some, give them more of a balanced fertilizer. Additionally, you're going to want to space these out a little further, not crowd them as much, and you may even consider going in there and thinning them out a little bit as they grow. So you've got two options there, just depending on what you're wanting. Do you want more green tops, or do you want these really big bulbs here? And in some cases, you may be limited a little bit just based on your climate. You live in a warmer climate, you may not be able to grow really huge bulbs just based on your weather and how these things are going to act in a mild winter. So now that we covered that, let's talk a little bit more about bulb formation in shallots. So shallots won't start bulbing until the days get long and hot. Now most shallot varieties are really long day shallot varieties, and that's why they never bulb down here, because in the summer our days are shorter than they are up north. These Louisiana Evergreen Shallots will bulb down here. That's why we like growing them and why we can't grow some of the other shallot varieties. So like I said, the long days are what triggers the bulbing in these, and that's why we don't see them bulbing until the days get really long in July when it's really hot outside. That's when they start bulbing, and that's when those plants subsequently start to die back. And then lastly, let me answer a question we've been getting a lot lately as people have been ordering these from our site, and as of today we do still have them in stock. So we've been getting a lot of questions from people in Zone 7, Zone 6, wondering if they should plant these now or wait until the spring to plant them. Now if you're in Zone 8 or further south, go ahead and plant them now. It's probably not going to get cold enough where you live to hurt these things. From my experience and from talking to other people, they're pretty dang cold hardy. Now if you're in Zone 7 or Zone 6, it might already be a little too cold where you live. I know I've seen it snowing in some places already. Might be too cold to plant these outside and get them going before they get zapped by some colder temperatures. I can't really speak to just how cold hardy they are, but I know they've never really been bothered down here. But the issue is these things probably aren't going to store until next spring. Here's some right here that have been sitting on my desk for a month or two. You can see they kind of dry up a little bit. I could probably still plant this. You get those little vegetative shoots, but they kind of get crispy and brittle there. They wouldn't store for another 3 months probably. So if you live somewhere where you were worried about the winter but you still wanted to get some of these going, this is what I would do. I would get me a pot. Think about something you might use for like a kitchen herb garden or something like that. Plant these in a pot right now. Grow them inside or in your garage over the winter. They'll do just fine in there. And remember, you can pick these things up, split them apart, move them at any point in time, and it doesn't bother them at all. They'll take off growing pretty quick. So just start them in a small pot or somewhere right now, and then come spring, you can pull them up, divide them if you want to, and then put them in your in-ground garden, your raised bed, or wherever you'd like. But don't try to hold on to these bulbs or store these bulbs for too long, because they eventually will get dry and crispy like these right here. Go ahead and get them in the ground somewhere, or get them in a pot somewhere. Go ahead and get them going, and you can always move them later. So I hope you enjoyed that comparison of strategies there for more vegetation or larger bulbs. Remember, that's specifically for shallots. I'm not talking about bulbing onions here. Those don't multiply or divide. We're just talking about shallots. Now, if you've already got some of these going, let me know in the comments below how they're doing and also where you're located. That way some of our other viewers can see, where all over the country these things are being grown. And like I mentioned earlier, we do still have these in stock at the moment, so you can go on over to our website, lazydogfarm.com, pick you up some if you want to give them a try. And if you want to know more about some other perennial alliums that we really like down here, watch this video. We'll tell you about another one that we've done really well with down here. So check that out, and we'll see you next time right here at Lazy Dog Farm.